Hello and welcome to another open source workplace video. If this is your first time coming across the channel, please hit that subscribe, hit that notification button so you're notified of all our future coming videos. Today, I'm super excited to be bringing someone who's very new, very different to the channel. His name is Paul McVeigh. He's a keynote speaker, an author, an ex-professional footballer, and someone who's very close and dear to my heart and sort of, you know, in his past experiences. So I'm really excited to bring in someone from Belfast as well. So Paul, welcome to the channel, and it's great to chat with you.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate you asking me on, and also it's just always quite, you know, it almost hits you there whenever you say you're an ex anything, you know, whether it's a partner, boyfriend, whatever. It's just like, oh, I get that. Even like the language, I always say I'm a former, but I appreciate the fact that you've introduced me that I'm a keynote speaker and used to kick a ball around as well.
You know, it's funny, Paul, you say that. Whenever I was actually writing out, sort of thinking through what to introduce you at, and I went through exactly the same emotion. To call someone an ex-professional footballer just feels so wrong, you know, and it's like you were, you know, but anyway, as we say, as we sort of go through this, and obviously there's what we want to try and do with these videos, Paul, is obviously, you know, you've written a book called The Stupid Footballer is Dead, which is going to be an interesting title, and we can maybe come to how you got to that title. But obviously the key thing behind the book, the key philosophy is the mindset. And those are some of the things that we're really going to tap into, and how that mindset you've developed over the years, how it can be applied into the workplace today. So that's obviously what we wanted to do. But I wanted to start off with, you know, Belfast. We both grew up in Belfast, and your book, you paint a picture of Belfast that sort of takes me back and reminiscing of what we both grew up through. And it's really hard for other people to sort of understand what it is, but you've conveyed it wonderfully well. And I just want to take an excerpt from your book, where it basically says, you growing up in Belfast, I think it helped me to have an appreciation and gratitude for the good things in life, and undoubtedly toughened me up and gave me an inner resilience.
Yeah, I think it's kind of true though. I didn't realize exactly, and probably still don't to this day, exactly the impact of growing up in 1970s and 80s and 90s in Belfast, where effectively there was a civil war going on. But of course, you know, I'm only a kid. I'm only like, you know, 8, 9, 10, all the way through to 16 before I left to go to join Tottenham Hotspur over in London, England, and to grow up in that era when there are tanks literally driving down your street. There are Saracens, massive armored vehicles with soldiers at the top with their rifles, with, you know, foot patrols in the full army gear, walking down your street as you're walking to school, and someone's just like got you in their sights the whole way past you. And seeing that, going to school every day and then being stopped by people and hearing all these strange accents that you might only have heard on the TV. That was what a civil war was. But of course, I'm a kid. I just want to play football. And I grew up. So for me, it was normal. For everyone else, it was probably quite weird looking in. It was almost like in this goldfish bowl of growing up in Belfast. But it was just normal, and I loved it.
Same here, Paul. And, you know, I remember I went to college, you know, I was 19 years old, and this was 93, and meeting friends for the first time at college. It says, oh, you must be so glad to get out of there and able to walk around the streets, you know, because that's the perception, and really hard for people to comprehend, you know, to sort of paint a picture for what people thought. So, you know, you then obviously, as you said, you signed for Tottenham Hotspur, which is a huge club in the UK, you know, in the Premier League. And that must have been a very proud moment for you, your family. But you also then went on to say some of the lessons that you learned and what you learned early, and sort of the 3Ds is what sort of drove your career. The 3Ds being drive, dedication, and determination. You know, you talk about in your book about ability is one thing, but these 3Ds are paramount.
Yeah, I think it was probably my basic understanding of what psychology was, or how important mindset was. And the reason why those 3Ds come from, it was from the scout who was working for Tottenham Hotspur but living in Belfast. And when he watched my first training session as an 11-year-old kid, he went straight over to my dad, asked him could I go over and go on trial at Tottenham Hotspur. But as I kind of got to know this guy called Robbie Walker, he just was started to give me more and more insight into what I'd be stepping into, because I was leaving effectively me growing up as a kid in Belfast at 16 into this professional footballing world of elite performance, ruthlessness, competitiveness, professionalism. And those 3Ds are a way for him to sort of say, listen, I know you think you're a decent player, but you're going to suddenly join a whole lot of really decent players. And once you're all at this level, then what's going to be the difference? And his way of explaining it, because he wasn't a psychologist, he didn't study anything around it, his was that 3Ds. I suppose looking back now, one of the first things that I really would have understood that impacted me massively destructively was my belief system. Now, of course, you don't know this. It's this unconscious incompetence you have as a 16-year-old. Of when I arrived at Tottenham Hotspur, my first day training was with Jurgen Klinsmann. Of course, Jurgen Klinsmann used to be the US national coach, World Cup winner with Germany. And I'm standing, training with this guy, this absolute legend of football, Hall of Famer, just the best you can get. And I'm training next to him because the first team weren't in, so they asked the youth team to come and train with him. And I'm creating this belief, looking at this guy going, if that's what it takes to be a first team player in the Premier League, I have no chance of doing that. And that's a belief I just adopted like that through no fault of my own, not because I had an inferiority complex that I was aware of, not because I think I'm particularly, had this imposter syndrome, just because I'm training next to a World Cup winner. And, to have that at the very, very start of your career is not a great starting point, because I already had the size against me being 5'6". And then it was only whenever I read a book by a guy I'm sure you'll know called Tony Robbins when I was 17. Friend just put it across my path, said, listen, why don't you read this book? And it was a bit like having the blinkers just kind of blown off me. And I was just completely on a different trajectory after I read that book in terms of my career path.
And what was it you took away from the book that did give you that trajectory?
Well, there was so many different lessons in it and so many different insights for me.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose if it was to try and concisely summarize what it's a good 500-600.
It's a huge book.
Chunky book called Awaken the Jam Within. I suppose the thing I would have taken away from it was stop looking outside of yourself, because everything you'll ever need in your life, you've already got within. Now, as a 42-year-old guy, that's powerful, sitting here today. As a 17-year-old kid back in the day, that just blew my mind, because, as I said, it was like the blinkers coming off. My horizons had massively expanded. And instead of going down this career path where standing next to Jurgen Klinsmann thinking, I'm never going to do this, suddenly understanding, well, what is that belief about? Why have I got that belief? Can I change that belief? Absolutely. What kind of beliefs should I be creating? What kind of aspirations do I want to start working towards that I never really had anything before? It was just like, I just want to be a professional footballer. And then reading that book was, okay, I don't just want to be a professional footballer, because I don't just want one game in the Premier League. I want a whole long-term career. So suddenly starting to adopt beliefs about me to achieve these goals, like I want to be a long-term professional footballer. I want to leave professional football after 20 years injury-free. I want to have X amount of, money in the bank, etc., etc. But these are all the goals that I created as a result of reading this book.
That's fantastic. And it is a wonderful book. And as I was sort of hearing you talk there, Paul, I was thinking, as we think about workplace and we think about work and the future of work today, and you take those questions that you were asking yourself back then, I mean, that's what so many business leaders, employees, and everyone is going through today. So there's lessons there for us all.
And this is what I didn't understand, that I was quite an open-minded kid. And again, starting to try and grasp a little bit of the understanding of why that was the case. I could probably point to maybe the fact that my dad was just loved learning. He had a real curiosity for life and the universe and how things work. And even just down to the fact that we'd be sitting in the living room in the evening, maybe watching a bit of TV, and he'd just maybe walk across to the bookshelf, take a book or an encyclopedia, maybe the old Encyclopedia Britannica, take it off the bookshelf and just start opening it up, and whatever it will happen to be. Let's say it was about the universe or about the distance to the sun or the speed of anything that was, like that I wouldn't have known about. And he's like, oh, look at this. And he'd bring you across, and his enthusiasm for learning and be able to go, look at this, how amazing that isn't it so good? You can just pick that book off the shelf and just start reading that, and you just like completely change your knowledge base.
Most people are going today, what are you talking about, Paul? What are these book things? All right, well, these encyclopedia things, we have the internet today, you know what I mean? That's so far gone, so far gone. But the other thing I sort of wanted you to, I want to really touch on today was you mentioned that there's a lot of moaners, right? As you go through that dressing room and you look at the environment, the people about you, yes, you're an elite athlete, footballer, and you're surrounded by all these individuals with different aspirations. And one of the things you noted was there are a lot of owners in all walks of life, and the danger that that leads to a negative mentally, blaming others, playing the victim. Those are things that, you know, it's hard to conceive that that happens in a dressing room, right? I can experience it, and a lot of people can attest to it in a workplace. So what are the things that sort of you learned from that environment in the dressing room that maybe we can take into the workplace?
I'd say probably the biggest lesson that I would share if I'm delivering any of my keynotes or any of the, the corporate training that I deliver around the psychology of performance, really, and elite performance, because that's what a sporting background is. You know, if you want to get
Mm-hmm.
to the very top of a professional sport, you have to be technically better, you have to be physically better, and also from your mindset perspective, you have to be doing things that other people wouldn't. And probably the number one thing that I learned was around accountability and responsibility, not for anyone else around you, just for me. When I take 100% accountability for not just what I do, but how I react, how I think about situations that I find myself in. Because let's be honest, if you're in the workplace, probably the people who don't have that kind of attitude, who aren't taking 100% responsibility, they normally like doing things like talking about others, blaming others, and especially in this part of the world, if blame were an Olympic sport, I think we'd be in the medals every 4 years. So, and of course, there's a certain area in the office that they generally congregate, normally around the coffee machine or around the water cooler, and have a little kind of, pity party about all the things that are going wrong. But it's always because they want to point at someone else. And winners don't do that. The best performers, the most successful world class athletes, and people that I came across, they were taking full responsibility for them. Because we know if I'm in a team environment and I've had to need all these other people to be successful, I know that I need to do my job, which is why, the team is only as strong as the weakest link. And if I'm not doing my job because of the ruthless nature of the world that I was in for 20 years, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was absolutely imperative that I did my job to the best of my ability. And one of the first facets or tenets of that is taking 100% responsibility for everything I think, feel, and do.
No, that's great. That's great, Paul. And look, and obviously, as we continue these conversations, we'll go through your career because there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be lessons that sort of you unfold through your book, the 12 lessons that you sort of articulated in the book. And I'm really looking forward to going through those. But for today, Paul, thank you. I appreciate you making the time for Open Source Workplace and speaking to us today. So thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.